My name's Clyde. I'm an alcoholic. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all tonight. I'm going to try to share some of the experiences that I had then and try to tell you what I did to get on the other side of then and try to share with you where I am today. There's not a lot different about me and my drinking, I wouldn't think, than the average alcoholic. I came from an alcoholic family. My mother and father drank. I took my own first drink when I was 15. Within a week, I was drinking in the mornings and I was blacking out. Quickly I found that alcohol gave me something that I didn't have in the rest of my life. It gave me not just a euphoria, not just another place or another being, but it elevated me to another plane of what I thought was a spiritual reality at the time. I felt through alcohol I would know no fear. I could experience no pain, and there were no limits to my abilities to conduct my life. And I acted that way. Early on, I was a gang member in an upcoming town, Las Vegas, Nevada. I learned how to do a lot of things that you read about today, to people and for people and from people, that I couldn't tell you that I'm particularly proud of. I was a very bad shot, and I don't think I ever hit anybody. But it wasn't for the lack of trying to see how close I could get. And I carried my life on that way. It was always how close I could get. How close I could get to something that was never real. I was lucky in a lot of ways. I was smart. The town was small, at least it was then. And I had a long way to go before the fall came. By the time I was 21, however, I needed a quart of vodka to fall into what you and I would call sleep today. I couldn't sleep without the assistance of alcohol. All of my 20s, except for 2 or 3 days, are just less than a memory. I don't remember too much what happened. I remember a couple of times, I have a couple of degrees. I remember graduating. I remember getting my bachelor's degree drunk, and I remember bowing my head to receive my doctor's degree and hoping when they put that big purple robe around your, ribbon around your shoulders, hoping that the pint in the pocket of this rented robe wouldn't fall out on the podium and embarrass my family. And that's how I lived my life. Everything I did was alcohol related. Early on I found that beer alone didn't do it for me, and I had to mix it up with other things. First of all, I mixed it up with hard liquor. Later on, it was wood alcohol and gasoline. And I found that by mixing these things, I could find a euphoria that was ever harder to reach as my alcoholism progressed. I also found that the things that happened to me in the places that I ended up and what was next changed. In the beginning, it was a good time with the other kids in the block. Later on, it was a bad time with the other guys in the cell block. And I didn't seem to have any direction or control about which it would be whenever I took off. As things progressed, I found myself in a position where I needed 40 drinks every day to maintain, and 12 different types of narcotics in the evenings, night times, to come down. I never had a chance to do anything but the same thing I was doing. If I missed any of the above, I had DTs, just like the DTs you probably had. Big monsters would come out of the wall as I lay there motionless in my bed and beckoned to me to come back farther, deeper into the disease. And I dug myself deeper into the disease, and I learned more about how I could stay drunker longer more. And I studied, and I went to the library, and I bought books, and I rented books. The 24-hour drink book, How to Be a Better Drinker, And I learned how to supercharge myself with alcohol and drugs. And I learned how to live my life, whatever there was of it, all around my disease. I was 29 before I heard the word alcoholic or alcoholism. I resented that thought. I didn't like anybody telling me that maybe there was something wrong with the way I was running my show. I knew I was in trouble. By that time, I was experiencing an arrest about once a month, always for an alcohol-related offense. Unfortunately, they were not all misdemeanors. And I was beginning to develop not only an ongoing resentment, but a concern about the way I was living. And I started seeking a different way to do this thing. I was tired of waking up sick. I was tired of working till noon to get even. And I sought another way to achieve what I thought was my God-given right to be drunk all the time, to be in that other place. So I mixed things up. Sure, I got a psychiatrist. I got 4 of them. They gave me great prescriptions. That helped. I learned by using a different tab at several bars that I could go from one place to the next place and find a little bit more before I got thrown out of that place. And then, that didn't work anymore either. I needed more help. I figured out a way to do this thing with a needle, and I found myself an alcoholic practicing physician, FACS guy who didn't make it, by the way. And I figured out how to get hospital-grade alcohol in an IV, stick it in my arm, and wake up in the morning the way I had to work till noon to be. Well, we put that plan into effect. We're all set to go. Luckily for me, my hospital physician fellow went crazy and blew his house up, and with that went my plan. And I didn't get to stick that needle in my arm. So I had to tough it out for a few more years. I had to figure out other ways to stay drunk. Well, it came to time that I couldn't eat anymore. I couldn't hold on anything solid. So I changed my eating habits from solid foods to soft foods, and then from soft foods to no foods. I was able to ingest a porridgey substance every Saturday morning, either of mashed potato soup or maybe a mashed bean porridge, and that was about all I could eat for the last couple of years. I couldn't get anything down that was solid at all. Then there came a time where I couldn't drink anything that didn't have alcohol in it. The thought of water alone was caused me to vomit. The thought of anything that didn't have a strong hunk of alcohol in it just wouldn't go down anymore. I couldn't swallow it at all. So I changed my habits there. If I needed something, like I remember the celeries and those Bloody Marys it was a big deal if I could eat the whole piece of celery. And after a while I couldn't do that anymore either. So I gave it up. Then I found that a lot of things that I was giving up me. Food. Later on, sleep. I found that I needed a variety of heavy-duty sleeping pills to knock me out for the shortest time so I could get ready for the next day's battle. A normal 8-hour knockout pill would put me under for about 6 minutes. Then I had to get up and do something different. I was always on the edge of death, I understand. And I was always on the edge of semi-consciousness. And after a while, it kind of poured over into the daytime, where I stayed semi-conscious. But I learned how to fake it. I'm self-employed. I was self-employed then. And I learned how to fudge my way through. And I kept my Bible by me. The 24-hour drink book explained to me how I could drink 24 hours a day. And all I had to do was be a little bit careful between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then it got to be where that didn't always work for me either. I wasn't always careful from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. because something or someone else or something else began to make my decisions in life for me. It was booze. It told me when I could go to work. It told me when I could leave. It told me when I had to have another drink. It told me everything. Pretty soon, it told me who I could associate with, who I couldn't associate with, and what I had to do to get through just a few minutes more. Well, after a while, I needed something alcoholic while I was awake. Every few minutes. Didn't have to be big, maybe, but it had to be constant. And if I went without it, I had terrible, terrible pains. And my parts quit working. My toenails fell off. And my fingernails got black like coal all the way to the quick. And my hair fell out. And I felt I was going to be bald at 30. In the end, I didn't have a solid bowel movement for the last 2 years. And I was leaking out of my excretion orifices so severely that I required assistance to avoid leaking on the floor. I found that. I found another use for condoms. I found another use for a feminine device that women only use usually, because I was leaking on the floor, and as I lived my life, that's how it was. Now, my answer to all these problems didn't suggest that I quit drinking, only that I find an easier, softer way to achieve the ends that apparently I was seeking. Then I found another doctor, and I investigated the opportunities and possibilities of a partial lobotomy. I wanted to know if there's some way that the part of me that didn't want to be sober could check in to this automatic partial lobotomy, and the rest of me that might have to do something to earn a living could be quasi-okay for whatever was next. Well, I couldn't find anybody interested in the idea except myself. And it didn't get off the ground. But I pursued that thought to the point of finding people that had lobotomies, looking in their eyes, trying to determine whether they were better off than me, or whether I was better off than them. Things got worse. My arrests accelerated. Sometimes I might get popped twice in a day, and my notoriety was blasphemous. Everybody knew that Clyde was drunk, and I started hitting the newspapers in this town where I've lived all my life with less than glorious accounts of my endeavors. I used to be thankful that on a typical bender of 5 to 7 days, I couldn't read anything that may have been written about me, and for several days thereafter it was the same. So by the time I came to, it was old news, and maybe the guy next door would forget. The guys next door to me didn't forget for an awfully long time. They reminded me of my endeavors, and so did the courts of law. Unfortunately, or fortunately as the case may be, I've learned that I hold the record for having been arrested more times than anyone in the history of the California State Bar. I was on criminal probation for 25 consecutive years, from 1957 till 1983. I got good at manipulating my probation officer, as I thought I got good at manipulating my life. As time went on, those that I thought were my friends left me. And soon I had no friends except the bottle. I had some acquaintances. I knew some bartenders. But I also knew that I couldn't use up my opportunities with them too long, or my 86 status, which seemed to happen daily, could become permanent. And those 3 little bars that I ran my life around might close down, and then I'd be in trouble. Well, about that time they started putting me in lockup wards, and they told me that I had a progressive brain syndrome problem. Well, I liked hearing that because I didn't want to think that I might have been an alcoholic. And I went along with it. And I started using lithium carbonate under the direction of a physician. And I used that lithium for a 2-year period. It afforded me the opportunity to step out of my skin and see who I was. Unfortunately, if you mix it up with alcohol and the rest of my drugs, it does different things than I think which the Romans intended when they found that stuff 2,000 years ago. What it did for me was make a bigger mess out of an existing mess, which just about caused the demolition of a whole lot more people than just myself. Still, I couldn't see how it would be possible that I, having achieved all this educational assistance and having done all these things, whose drunk driving defense was a model for the state bar — I don't think they knew I was a drunk at the time — some guy that had done everything I could do and had done everything that I had done could still have difficulty with what I felt was my God-given right for relaxation. Some examples. By age 21, I was doing the tax return for one of the richest men in the world. They liked me. Same year, I'm in the gutter, noticing the daylight and nighttime only because of the way the water changes. It gets warmer in the day. Another year, I have a chance at a Rhodes Scholarship, or Annapolis, in the Navy. Same year, I'm trying to bust my way out of a jail in some awful little town, Riverside, California. Another drunk beef. Trying to help some kid across the street. Thank God they didn't misconstrue it as a molest. And that's how it was for me. Topsy-turvy, up and down, up and down. And if I started to think I was getting better, I could not stand the prosperity long enough to put 2 and 2 together and to take the next step to help me. Then I started going to jail for longer periods of time. First a week, then a month, then a few months. And I started to think that maybe I'd have to end up in state prison with a forced sobriety circumstance before I'd ever find myself in a situation where I could go without alcohol long enough to see who I was. Bear in mind, I wasn't sure that I wanted to know who I was, but I was beginning to get so sick that 1 or 2 days out of every month or so, I wasn't able to drink as much as I usually did, and I started to think that maybe there was another Clyde. Maybe. By this time, I'd left my home state of Nevada, where I went to high school and started drinking, and I stayed here so I wouldn't be an embarrassment to my family in a bigger town. I don't think I was always successful. I would have been less successful had I stayed there. On the other hand, my career opportunities in another state were better than having to start over again here. But I felt that the number one thing was drinking, and the number one reason for me to be was to stay as drunk as I could as long as I could. And I began to think that I was invincible. I had no difficulty in eating bar glasses if I chose, jumping out of windows or cars, jumping off buildings, charging people with guns going off. One year I fought the Mongols and the Hells Angels at the same time, just a few months apart. I remember having a street court with them, and I was the defendant for some crazy thing I did in Pacific Beach one year. And based on my experiences in divorce court, I think I had a better shot with those guys. But that's how it was. It was up and it was down, but I never was able to grab on to anything that lasted. Then something changed. Bear in mind, I'm no quick study. I come to believe that it wasn't working for me anymore, and I got to be where you could tell the difference between 80 and 100 proof alcohol, and I couldn't get along at all without a strong shot constantly. And after I couldn't sleep, sex was just a memory. I couldn't eat. I had trouble breathing one day, but I needed a drink so bad. I was home alone. I needed a drink so bad, the desire to drink was more important than the next breath of air. My throat had swollen shut, such that I couldn't swallow. And that day, that moment, as things started blacking out, and there was a white that comes if you've ever blacked out, you know what I mean. I had a bottle of vodka or gin, I remember it was clear, longer necked bottle, and that's the day that I learned why they make bottles round. And if you were like me, once you got the lid off, that never mattered because it wasn't going back on. But I was able to take that quart or fifth bottle, a long neck bottle, and jam it down my throat to pull apart past the swollen glands to get the alcohol in my system as I stood there choking, about to fall down because I couldn't breathe. I remember that like it was yesterday. Well, I hope things like that don't happen to you. They happen to me, and they happen to me on a regular basis. And I came to believe that was the reason I was on earth. Then I sought the accompanyship of lessers to attempt to feel equal. I moved my drinking to Tijuana, where I took up residency. Tijuana is a little border town on the other side of the border here, for those that aren't familiar with it. And I found a lot of folks down there that would put up with me. And I found that I could get a hotel room there, which I did. I could live in the hotel room, which I did. I could carry on my life here in town to the extent that I needed to, which I did. And I could commute like a lot of others, which I did. And that became comfortable. That lasted for a while. Some things went wrong. I contracted a deadly illness, a spinal meningitis, from which I almost died at the ripe old age of 18. And I got it from my drinking episodes in Tijuana. As a result of that, I spent 4 years learning how to run again. That's the African sleeping sickness, as a normal name, I suppose. And I slept incessantly for almost 2 years. It put a dent in my drinking, but not so much that I could not overcome it. And I got back where I wanted to be as fast and as soon as I could. Well, after my first nut ward lockup, I'd learned to manipulate the system, both the exterior system and the interior system of me, so well that I thought I'd found the answer on the continued drunkenness that I wanted so badly. And I conducted myself that way until the legal system set in. I was visited by members of the state bar who weren't impressed with my performance. I once had diarrhea in court, speaking at a podium just like this in front of a judge and a lot of other people. That was embarrassing. I lost my plug that day and leaked in the floor. I had to feign a dropping of my pen to pick up my plug and back out, hoping nobody was seeing me. Well, everybody knew what was going on. It was that drunken Clyde again. Well, I got used to those kind of experiences, and they got worse. They got worse, and they got constant, and they got all the time. And they got to the point where it looked like I was going to go to state prison for another one of the results of a drunken episode. I welcomed the thought, but it didn't come to pass. Some bright judge reduced my felony to a misdemeanor and sent me down the road. I thanked her years later when I had a little time, but for that I would have lost my ticket. When I was 29, after my first mental ward lockup, I was offered the opportunity to avoid local custody if I'd attend these meetings that I grew to hate quickly. And I attended the meetings, a little sign-up sheet. I had that sign-up sheet for 5 years, and I went to those meetings 3 times a week for 5 years, drunk or sober. I'd show up at a meeting, and I'd con my probation officers into believing that I was doing these things, and that for whatever reason I felt bad or looked bad today was a toothache or whatever. And I got away with it. I was rarely revoked. Eventually, in the end, several more hospitalizations later, and a whole lot more arrests. I noticed that the booze wasn't working anymore. I couldn't mix. I couldn't match. I couldn't find that euphoria. I began to get worried. I thought about heroin, but I was fearful of needles. Then I noticed that some of my heroin drinking friends were very successful with methadone. I got some methadone. Lisa B., who's now dead, took it out of the refrigerator one bright Sunday morning, drank it herself, got deathly ill, and that's when I learned that methadone only works if you have a heroin addiction first. I wasn't willing to go through the heroin addiction to get well behind methadone. I tried some other experiences. If you touch the cocaine, interferes. The marijuana, the same thing. And I got to the point where all I wanted to do was drink all the time. Nothing else mattered. I lost my family. I lost my friends. I lost my fortune. And the only fame I had was infamous. And the thirst hung in. It just stayed. I couldn't ever get enough. In coming to these meetings, over a 9-year period, however, during which I was a newcomer most of the time, some things happened to begin to change things. But it was the last experience with alcohol, which I thought was in November of 1978, that got my attention. As referenced, and as you may have guessed, I was a barroom brawler. And I usually like to pick fights with the biggest group of the strongest men. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I'm small. But the booze made me, like Sneaky Pete, feel invincible. And I'd do anything. I'd charge a wall and try to knock it down with my head. I'd do anything that I thought might either show off or prove my manhood or whatever BS is there is in us that makes us want to go out and do these kind of things. I ran my whole show that way. Well, when I turned 35, I'd had a case in Montana. I came back through Vegas, started a 5-day bender, and over that 5-day period, I found that I got myself arrested twice in one day for drunk driving. At the second arrest, I knocked over a telephone pole, and the steering wheel knocked my teeth out of the car. And I got out, and these electrical lines were dancing in the middle of the street on a Sunday afternoon. And all I could think of is that arrest was imminent, jail was absolute. I hadn't had a driver's license for many years. So I ran back to the bar, and I asked Gene Herder, he's dead now. I asked him what time it was, and as he looked at his watch, I stole his drink. And I ordered a couple of shooters, and I was able to drink the shooters, holding the bar towel against my upper gums where my teeth were gone, to pour the whiskey down. Well, the police came in. There had been a trail of blood, mine, from the incident to the bar, and some do-gooder citizen at a curbside lineup didn't have any trouble identifying me, and they took me off to the hospital. Always a step ahead. Had managed to call to a drinking doctor friend of mine, and he met us at the ER room and informed him I had a concussion and that they couldn't take me away. Well, the truth of the matter is I did have a concussion, but it didn't slow me down. After they sewed up my mouth from the inside and the outside, and the police left, I left the emergency room as well. Ran to another bar. I had a few more shooters, and I noticed that nobody cared that I was bleeding all over the bar top. I walked back to the hospital, explained that I was an alcoholic and had been admitted there 5 times previously, and asked for a private room. Well, they gave me a room. I saw the phone. I called Max P. up. He's dead now. And I asked him for a pint of brandy. He said, "Sure, Clyde, I'll be right over." They gave me some Demerol and knocked me out. The next day I woke up needing a drink badly. I needed to get out of that hospital. I got out, I had to drink, and I sat on it. Everything from my longest hair to my longest toe hurt. I hurt everywhere. I was falling apart. I was 35 years old, and I was next to dead. And I couldn't stop drinking. By that time, I'd been in the program, or outside the program, as you will, for over 6 years. I'd been in the hospital 8 times. I'd received 10 drunk driving tickets. 7 of them were resulted in convictions. I'd been arrested well over 50 times, and there seemed to be no hope. I couldn't eat, no sleep, only pass-out times, no sex, no food, no solid bowel movements, no nothing. I leaked constantly, and I was in trouble. I remember sitting outside my walkway to my home, thinking, November 7th, 1978, that the end was here, and there wasn't a reason to continue on. I toughed it out that night. I woke up at 5 in the morning like always, dying for a drink. And instead of the drink, I tried to run. Now bear in mind, by this time my left leg had quit working and I was dragging it around. I was happy to see when they cut the curbs and guys like me could get up the curbs for wheelchairs. I figured they did that for us. A little bit easier than before when I had to lift my left leg by the pants to get up a stair or a curb. But I tried to run that morning. I think I got 12 steps and collapsed, but I didn't give up. I hitchhiked over to the Alano Club. I sat there for a couple, 3 hours. Then I tried to go to work. And I did the same thing the next day. And then I figured out that maybe I can't do this a day at a time. I'm not making it. I shortened it to an hour. Within a week, I had it down to 5 minutes. And I kept it at 5 minutes at a time for almost 11 months until I could go a whole hour. And then I noticed that about 11 months I was able to eat a full meal again. I worked at it every day. I threw away all the books I had on how to be a better drinker, how to stay higher longer, and do all the rest of this nefarious stuff that I'd learned in my life. And I slowly started to accept some of the things that you were telling me, understanding I never quit going to the meetings from the beginning until today. I never quit going to the meetings. I got thrown out of the professional meetings. I got thrown out because I was a disgrace to my society and my profession. I got thrown out maybe because they didn't like me. It didn't matter why I got thrown out. I learned that I never had a chance till I became an alcoholic first, before I was a man, before I was an American, before I was an attorney, before I was anything. I was an alcoholic first. Until that happened, I never had a chance to get a day, an hour, or 5 minutes without a drink. Eventually, slowly it took. At 14 months, I got the feelings back in my hands where I could pick up a fork or a cup or a pencil without using the 2 of them. They'd gone dead from the elbow down on my lower 2 digits. I didn't expect it back. And the rest of me came back. I lost 55 pounds over a 2-year period, and it stayed off. My hair grew back. And the gray went away, and it became black or brown again. I understand this was in the 70s. It's changed since now, but thank God for other reasons. And I worked on every part of me. I worked on my ability to go up and down staircases. I worked on my ability to run. I worked on my ability to shave with my eyes open again because I wasn't mad at that guy in the mirror. I found that I didn't bleed so easily or bruise so easily. I quit sweating gin. And my toenails grew back. You probably didn't know they do that. I didn't know they do that. When mine fell off, I couldn't see them. I was so big and fat I couldn't see my feet, and I decided I didn't need my toenails anymore because I didn't plan on doing a hell of a lot of walking. Then I found that I wanted to do more than walk. I found that I could run. I found that I could play. I learned how to smile again.
I learned how to sleep again. I got married again, and this is a guy that hadn't had any sex in quite a while. I had kids again. I've got a child today who's never seen me take a drink for a good reason. I haven't had a drink in his entire life. He's supportive and he understands. He's 11 and a half years old. He understands who Daddy is, why Daddy is, and what Daddy is. But for the grace of God and the program, I never would have had the ability to have a child again. It wasn't in me anymore. I could care about sex. Same thing with food. I quit eating because it didn't matter anymore. But when I let you people in and the message you shared with me, things got better. Slowly. It was 9 years from my first meeting to my last drink. I guess you'd have to say I was hard-headed about it. I couldn't understand how or why or where this might fit for me. All I wanted to know is how I could continue to fit my drinking life into a human body or into this world. Reminds me of the little tippler. The little prince is floating around in space, and he goes to the planet of the tippler. And he asks the tippler, who's drunk, sitting between a pile of open bottles and a pile of empty bottles. And he's emptying these bottles, drinking all the time. And the little prince asks the tippler why he's drinking. And the tippler tells him that I'm drinking to forget. That made a lot of sense to the little prince, who was grabbing up everything he could in his trip around the universe. And he asked the tippler what it is that he was trying to forget. Between drinks, the tippler told him, I'm trying to forget that I'm ashamed. That I'm ashamed. That made more sense to the little prince. The little prince asked him the inevitable question, well, Mr. Tippler, I appreciate your sharing with me, but pray tell, why are you ashamed? The tippler was honest. The tippler told him, I'm ashamed that I'm drinking. And that's how it was with me. I stirred it up. I kept it there. And I thought that was the inevitable end for me. I did not plan to live to 30. I didn't plan to live to 40. And I sure as hell didn't plan to make it 13 years. Which I have today, by the way. I'm going to share with you what I had to do. A guy with an IQ of 150 or whatever. A guy that has a doctor's degree. A guy whose work's been used in models. A guy that's worked for the richest and the poorest in America. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I got down to make this work for me. The first thing I did was I quit the bullshit. Maybe I couldn't make the first step. I mean, I tried for almost a decade and couldn't do the first step. Or the first half of it. But I got down to where I could capsulize the entirety of a smart man's program in 3 simple words. Those 3 simple words, ladies and gentlemen, are thank you, God. And I tell myself thank you, God, for everything around me, everything I feel, my ability to knock on wood and feel the concussion in my knuckles, my ability to swallow without regurgitating something that isn't filled full of alcohol, my ability to have sex, to sleep, to eat something that isn't polluted or mashed up like potatoes. I don't eat beans anymore. But I got that thank you, God, down to 3 little letters, TYG, that even a guy like me can say in a time of stress, of need, when I don't want to let halt in, I don't want to call my sponsor, I'm pig-headed about what's in front of me, but I can always do my TYG. I can do my TYG 500 times a day to myself if I need to, and I don't have to go any farther than that to think why, what, where, who, when, and what this is all about for us. I 12-step every day that I can. Walking up here today, I found a guy on the lawn. I invited him in. He told me he wasn't a drunk. I told him the food was free. I hope he shows up. And I found that for me, as long as I keep my memory green, I don't get rotten. I found for me, as long as I can do my little simple program, I don't forget. I found for me that as long as I spend all of my days working, thinking, being what's most important to us in life, I have a chance. And a chance to make a choice, to live rather than die to the drunken bum that I was in the gutter. It's something that you gave me. You gave it to me openly. You gave it to me without reservation. You gave it to me free. And you continue to do that on a daily basis. You continue to do that for me, whether I want it or whether I don't. It's always there, available. Now, I've had some troubles. I've had some great troubles. I've been rich and I've been poor. But I've never been without the love of the program to help me see that no matter who I thought I was, I'm nothing without my sobriety first. First in front of manhood. First in front of money, property, prestige, sex, food, sleep. First in front of America. First in front of everything in my life. First in front of my children. First. And it cannot be anything but first if a man like me, who was drinking gasoline at the age of 15, wood alcohol by 17, that never stopped, would have any chance to succeed. Not just in life, not just with a wife, not just with a family, not just with a profession, but with the ability to think, the ability to use what God gave me to do something with besides concoct methods up to stay drunker longer, to consider the lust that I found from the bottom of the bottle when all else left me, and only the bottle was my friend, and then the bottle turned against me too, and I couldn't get high anymore. I couldn't get down, I couldn't get off, I couldn't get up, I couldn't do nothing but drink. And I felt it was all over. Until you came and pulled me up. Slowly. I had 50 sponsors, one by one, and each fired me for the same reason. I was incorrigible. I wasn't going to stop. They didn't want to go down. Maybe they didn't want a loser on their list. And I don't disagree with any of them. I don't find fault. I don't find fault with those that have tried to help me. And I don't know what it was that rang my bell to pull me up. I don't think it was just the losing of my teeth. I don't think it was just the thought or the threats of the incarceration. I don't think I just had enough one day and said, I'm not going to drink anymore. God, the spiritual awakening is here. Or I wouldn't have wasted 9 years figuring it out. But what I found, by hook or by crook, that coming to these meetings, by court order, albeit, but coming to these meetings and having to sit here for the ungodly amount of time of nearly an hour without a drink, eventually sunk in long enough for me to be curious enough to want to know what it was like to feel how you might feel for a little bit of time. Not a long bit of time, but a little bit of time. So I tried it. I tried it a little bit of time. I was a 30-day newcomer at my home group for 30 months in a row once. I didn't always like it. I didn't think it was necessarily good for me, but I did note things changed. If I could go this little bit of time. And then you made me some promises. We've all read about the promises. Well, I listened up for the promises. You were talking about stuff that I didn't have any feel for. You were talking about stuff that I couldn't comprehend. You were making me promises of things that were in another world, maybe the hereafter for guys like me. And it went in one ear and out the other. But then, as I let my little bits of time becomes little bits of more time, one or two of those promises came true. I was ecstatic The first time I slept a whole night without the use of narcotics. Was more ecstatic when I found sex again. But I was most ecstatic when after a 2-year period I had a solid bowel movement. It really is, or was, a very awakening experience. I think I know how a newlywed female must feel in the beginning. It was excruciating, and what a relief. To know, to eat, to live, to sleep, to be, to think, and maybe to reach out and touch the life of another in a positive manner became the most important thing. And it got better. All those promises you made me came true for Clyde. And more you didn't promise me came true. Great things happened to me. I got rich. Then I lost it. And then I figured out that didn't matter. What matters is who I am inside me, who I can help, how I can help, when I can help, which is always, and what your love for me has helped me do, and what I hope you feel with my love for you. I've kept that way. I've kept that way since the beginning. There's a few minutes left. I like to offer questions. I don't know if you have anything to say to me, but I want you to know that my opportunity to hear tonight was an awakening experience for a guy like me. And I didn't like me in the 13th year, but today's the first day of the 14th year for me, and I already feel better. And I thank you very much.